outlines in territorial waters. The new South Democratic Alliance will also immediately practice their peace bomb deployment against the Balili Empire. After this, Locke and Morgan ask why is the new South Democratic Coalition. The chief replies that stars like rain before blowing down, and that man was already there, where the lights disappeared. On the other side, in the open area, Sheng set the chair. He smiled and pointed toward the chair. Please welcome Ducini, saying please take a seat. Seeing this, Ducini gets prudish and thanks him. She sits on the chair, thinking strangely. Yesterday, everyone was still anxious about the possibility of being hit by peace bombs. Then she looked at Sheng, wondering why he asked her alone today as if nothing had happened, while Ba Lili passionately watched both of them hiding behind the pillars. Ducini also sees her hiding there, and then Ducini shouts at her, asking if she thinks this is the date. She suddenly realizes and says she came to the appointment without dressing up. Ba Lili surprisingly looks toward her, and after saying this, Ducini thinks if she thinks about it. The revered ancient emperor is mainly surrounded by tall and plump beauties, but he never seems to have taken the initiative to invite anyone. After this, Ducini folds her arms, blushes, and confidently sits there, thinking this is good for her, because she is the closest to his current size. It is she, while Ba Lili stands beside her, surprisingly looking toward Ducini. After this, Sheng shows Ducini the equipment he has created. Looking toward the equipment, Ducini thinks it's just that the view doesn't seem to be very good in this dating place. Ba Lili, standing near equipment in the distance, waves her hands to call them over, and Sheng also waves his hand, replaying her okay. After this, both Sheng and Ducini sit on the chairs there. Ba Lili serves them juice while Ducini looks toward Sheng. She thinks, not to mention a third wheel that has been dangling around restlessly since a while ago. Then Sheng sits there with his hand under his chin and says, speaking of which, he has never acknowledged the name of the Eternal Emperor. Later generations passed it down haphazardly, and he smiled, telling many of the people. Those who followed him back then would call him by his first name, and if she felt constrained, she could also call him Xin Sheng. Ducini blushes and screams, thinking she should call him by his first name. This is a meaningful date. After this, she calls his name lovingly, and he also, in return, smiles and calls her name, saying N. Ducini. Hearing this, she blushed and put her hand on her, thinking it was not good. Her heart is violently hitting her hardened chest. However, Sheng lovingly looked at her and asked her to bring the terminal with her. She didn't forget when she came. Ducini, holding the phone in her hands, asks if he wants to exchange contact information and if he will secretly talk with her tonight. Sheng replies, it's about time for it to come. Meanwhile, her phone rang, she picked up the call, and it was Locke Morgan. They both started chatting. As soon as Locke Morgan briefly introduces himself, Ducini surprisingly gets up. After this, she, holding the call, says to Sheng, the presidential king of the Balili Empire, that he would like to speak with him. Hear this, Sheng smile, making sure he has been waiting for it. After this, Sheng returns to his mansion. Young Yu sniffs his fragrance and then asks the master if he went out this morning. He asks where he left the flaw. Then she approached him and started sniffing, saying he had the aroma of dessert on him. Sheng smiled, saying he relaxed on the way back and forgot to remove the smell. After some time, Sheng held the meeting with his companions there. He said he wanted to start by telling them the good news. The morning he spoke with the presidential king of the Balili Empire, the empire decided not to use peace bombs anymore. Hearing this, they get surprised, and Huoxulai asks how this happened in the world while Shang Yuji laughs, saying she isn't surprised. Wuli sits between them and asks if they can hear anything from the call's content. Then Shang Yuji looked towards Sheng and asked what he was talking about. Sheng recalled when Locke Morgan was chatting and asked him what he could offer, and what does he want to steal from the Empire. Then Sheng replies, telling Shang Yuji that it is not a big deal, and that they just decided to meet face to face. Then Sheng says that 2 weeks later, a formal tripartite meeting of the highest level will occur in the Serbian-Hungary Principality. Yongyu asks 3 parties, the Steel Art City, Uter, and the Balili Empire. Sheng replies, no, it's Uter Balili Empire, and the new South Democratic Alliance. And then he looks toward Ducini, saying he knows this is an insult to her. The presidential king doesn't see her as the king of Steel Art City and seems to approve that he has conquered her through force. After this, Sheng says this loss will return for her in the negotiations. Ducini gets nervous and replies, it's right. She isn't that sensitive. If he is willing to take over Steel Art City, he might do a better job than her. Sheng closed her eyes, replaying Ducini. If she thought he would reign over everything quickly as he did 1,000 years ago, that would be a huge mistake. After this, Sheng opened his eyes and covered his hand with his perfect mimicry, saying the kingly way has always been adapted to local conditions and changes following the changes of the times, and his excellent skills were born for this purpose. This tripartite meeting is an excellent opportunity to verify the new law of the kingly way that aligns with this year. For the next 2 weeks, intense and busy preparations were in order. After this, she sat on a swing in the tree above Kalba Lily. She looked up. There, Sheng eats sweets and asks about the experimental field's condition. She lovingly looks at him. Then, pointing toward the areas, tells Little Lord to take a look. The grain is growing well and won't take long to ripen. After this, Sheng tells back that after the Seed Alliance, he let all the races keep some seeds as food. Fortunately, the Yingluo Wild Wine clan left behind this breed of species, otherwise, it may not meet their needs. Then Ba Lily plentifully took toward the grain fields and said the seed that Little Lord Sheng had Ba Lily quietly plant when he returned grew too fast. Then she asked what kind of species this was. Sheng kneeled near her and held a sprig of grain, telling her this is called the 7th rice, which matures 6 times a year and is a species from the demon realm. When it develops for the 7th time, it means a new round of growth, and its seeds evolve to another new stage and will tell no one would ever dare to threaten them with hunger anymore. As Sheng and his team were in the Yingluo Empire standing near Sheng's equipment, Baowu came to Sheng, reporting, the new factories and laboratories are ready for operation. As Sheng was standing near him holding the cap, he replied from the time he took over the Uter that this project would be completed today. As expected, it is a steel art city with a robust industrial base. After this, Sheng blinked his eyes, twirled the lollipop, and said to Baowu, let's start production of their weapons right away. The sooner, the better, until it is enough to rival the Balili Empire. Hearing this, Baowu replies he agrees with the armament expansion, and then he asks what that laboratory is used for. Sheng flips his lollipop, saying that it's another bargaining chip they can use to invite new clients, and it is much more important than weapons. However, they return to Uter Empire. In the meeting hall, Yang Yu, holding the paper, stands up as it is her turn to add her point. She tells everyone that the daily report will begin now. Sheng sits aside and looks toward her, and she means more than 90% of Uter's residents have been resettled, currently still temporarily residing on the imperial borderline until the empire makes a substantial move. They continue to be wary of possible peace bomb strikes. Then she turned the report card page telling the site for the new city had been decided, but funding and equipment were not yet in place. Hear this, Sheng wave his hand and smile, replaying that's one urgent, let's wait until the tripartite talks are over. After this, Sheng looks toward Yang Yu and asks how she feels about handling Uter's affairs recently, and if he leaves this place to her, does she have the confidence to take care of it? However, hearing this, Yang Yu paused, and then, after some minutes, she eased up, saying she thought she was still far from it. It is better to continue learning alongside Master first. To hear Yang Yu's words, Huoxu Lai and Wu Li think she is showing selfishness there, and Shang Yuji smiles, thinking of a human with low self-esteem. Meanwhile, Deathbird comes there holding 3 men, and she throws them before Sheng. Sheng sees the last batch of spies from the Balili Empire. Deathbird nodded and yes, then Sheng stood up and patted her head, saying as expected of the primogenitor spiritual body. Her ability to understand spiritual rhythm has not deteriorated when she bows her head before Sheng blushes. This is how their meeting continues. After this, Sheng gets up, telling everyone it's time to go. After this, Sheng, standing in their ship's area, says to Baowu that someone once said what is negotiated at the table is decided before the negotiation. The point of negotiation is to get the party not yet mentally prepared to accept the facts. Meanwhile, Baowen comes from behind and bows before Sheng, telling Xin Sheng he has followed his order to return to the ship as scheduled, allowing him to navigate to the Principality of Serbia, Hungary. He heard his name from Baowen's mouth, and Sheng surprisingly said after he told everyone they could call him by his name directly. It seemed that he was the fastest to accept it. Baowen laughed, telling him he couldn't feel fear while Baowu stood near them, thinking of a blessing in disguise. After this, Sheng pats Bowen's arm, saying, don't worry since he decided to appoint him, and he will not pursue his past words and deeds, nor will he regret it. However, Sheng and both brothers, Baowen and Baowu, leave that shipping area. While leaving, Sheng says to them, let go. After 1,000 years, how much has the world's glib skill improved? Let him have a taste of it. After this, in the Principality of Serbia and Hungary, on the day of the tripartite meeting, Xiao Yinghu gave polite gestures to welcome Sheng there, saying welcome, King of Uter. After this, he pointed to the venue. He said the presidential king and the chief of NSDA were already waiting inside the venue. Sheng was with Beowu, and Bowen asked him if the king of Uter was supposed to be Kaio, and if he could call him Xin Sheng. After this, Saho Yinghu bows before Sheng replies, "Excuse him, although he has no right to request him, he has an impertinent request." Then he demands Sheng not to demolish the bridge after crossing the river to Serbia, Hungary. While moving from inside the venue, Sheng tells him not to worry. He aims to cross the river but to get on the bridge. However, Beowen and Beowu stand outside the venue to wait for Sheng with Saho Yinghu. Both brothers stood there when she left, suspicious of what would happen next. Beowu thinks it's about dealing with the Balili Empire and setting up a bank, while Beowen believes he can't understand the political riddle. However, Sheng pushes the door and enters the meeting hall. Seeing him there, Locke Morgan says Xin Sheng has been waiting for him for a long time. Then he tells Sheng to take a seat. While Sheng is standing there, he puts a hand on his heart, thinking the profound life mystery is surging in his chest, and an emotion wants to intervene with his consciousness. He ought to restrain this drive, but this time, it is going along with what he intended. Also, the flash of light appears from his heart. After this, Sheng pats his heart, replaying Locke Morgan as he imagined him as a candid person. However, Sheng steps back, apologizing, and asks him to tear off his disguise. After coming out, he dismisses his perfect mimicry. Then, standing between his mimicry, Sheng says 1%, and Sheng comes into his original form of Demon King. He saw this, and Xiao Yinghu got scared as he talked to Beowen and Beowu. While Sheng stood near the venue, looking grand and then putting his hand on the venue's roof, Sheng said to President King, "This venue seems unable to accommodate his sincerity, as he could see, shouldn't they change the place?" Seeing Sheng from the roof's mirror, Locke Morgan is surprised, while the chief of the New South Democratic Alliance, Fengshen, thinks Sheng's height is more than 40 meters. This is the real Xin Sheng 1%. Then he smiled, thinking this trip to the north was perhaps more interesting than he expected. After some time, Sheng returns to his human form, and he excitedly says make themselves at home. However, the meeting starts between the three Sheng, who sit on the chair and point to the sweets on the table. These are all handmade by him, one of the kind only treats in the world. Hear this, Locke Morgan gets enraged and abuses Sheng, saying what a disgrace. In front of him is the presidential king of the Bailey Empire, Locke Morgan, and the chief of the New South Democratic Alliance, Fengshen. After this, Locke Morgan points towards Sheng angrily and says to Ying with the rulers of today's world, "The price can be prohibitive." Hearing this, Sheng surprisingly asks the rulers, and they both do. After this, Sheng sits on the chair confidently cross-legged and says to Locke Morgan that he speaks the language he introduced to the world 1,000 years ago. He wrote and passed the words down 1,000 years ago, using the weights and measures defined by his establishment uniformity. He enjoyed the ease of communication and the basis of domination as he broke down the barriers between the world's species. Even so, 1,000 years later, humans only reign over the eastern half of the world centered on the Sky Curtain Sea. And then Sheng asks both of them, with only half of the world, how dare someone claim to be the ruler of the world in front of him? Hear this, Locke Morgan gets enraged and heatedly looks towards Sheng while Fengshen claps, saying it's right since this is the start, let's stop it there. At the same time, Locke Morgan is surprised to see Fengshen's behavior. After this, he tells Sheng what kind of strength he has. What kind of words does he say? Anything else is nonsense, while Sheng, looking toward Fengshen, ponders the person with the most say in the New South Democratic Alliance. He is also the creator of the unique New South Democratic Partnership. Moreover, the Ascension Pavilion he led is a political organization. Each East member is superbly vital and claims to be immortal. So, the New South Democratic Alliance is neither a state of law nor a state ruled by man. It is the land of everlasting rule. After this, Fengshen says to Locke Morgan that there is a question he must answer truthfully. Then he asks, did the Balili Empire secretly increase its reserves of peace bombs, and was there a major technological breakthrough? Dropping 2,000 of them at once, he is that much confidence. However, looking toward Fengshen, Locke Morgan says more than his question. He is curious about where the hell the information comes from that he would be dropping peace bombs. As they both were talking, Sheng sat aside and ate ice cream. While eating it, he said to both of them that maybe there was a problem within them. After this, he licks the ice cream, saying, for example, the head of the Intelligence Bureau and something like that. Meanwhile, Locke Morgan remembers thinking it was Dao Zhen, Indeed, only she is the most suspicious. While pondering this, he angrily squints. At the same time, Sheng was desperately looking toward the sweet lying on the table before him, and he had already eaten much. After this, Sheng smiled, looking toward Locke Morgan while Locke was lost in his thoughts. He thought it was Dao Zhen, and maybe she wasn't a specific Duke-level figure who had attended the meeting that day. Besides Dao, Zhen Emset has colluded with Yuter in secret, wanting to kill with a borrowed knife, want him to get rid of the trouble for her, using such childish provocation against him. What a way to look down on him. The game on this board is just starting, and she won't win against him even at one step. However, Locke Morgan says, in short, Yuter has seriously affected the order of the human kingdom. Such dangerous acts must be punished, and there will be no peace for all humankind. They must restrict all goods flowing into and out of Yuter until Yuter's state behavior is corrected. While Fengshen looks toward Locke, Morgan thinks he seems to be threatening Yuter. In fact, he is trying to use the concept of all humanity to abuse his position. Then, Fengtain looked towards Sheng, who was reading and flipping through the world history book, and thought he couldn't make any statement at this juncture, so how would he respond to Xin Sheng? After this, Sheng tumps and closes the book, telling 1,000 years of the history of humanity he has recently read. Then Sheng smiles and says to Locke Morgan he gradually abandoned his quest for the demon realm and turned to the choice of technology. Admirable, but at the same time, he noticed a fascinating phenomenon. Theoretical research in human technology has been far ahead of scientific results. Even in recent decades, it can be said that no completely new technological achievement has been made. After this, Sheng clenched his fist, saying the reason for this is that humankind can no longer find materials that can support scientific and technological theories. Then Sheng asks if he is right. Locke Morgan replies, asking in return what he is talking about. They are not talking about such irrelevant topics right now while Fengtain sits there watching Sheng's fist. Hear this. Sheng smiles, opens his fist before them, and reveals the celestial copper, saying he knows, and just as he might imagine, it is cosmic copper. After this, he clenched his fist, and the perfect mimicry covered his whole fist. When Sheng opened his fist, the cosmic copper cracked into pieces. After this, Sheng says that the ambient superconductor 100 million degrees non-plasma customized for resistance strength material. This, both Locke Morgan and Fengshen get surprised, and then Locke Morgan gets enraged and says to Sheng, ruler of Yuter, may he take his present words and action as a political provocation. Not only did he provoke a leader of the Balili Empire, but now he wants to provoke the whole empire. Hear this, Sheng backs off and replies if that's his answer, Mr. Locke Morgan, then this tripartite meeting can be concluded by saying, Sheng stands up. He then turns around while Locke Morgan sits angrily and asks what he is told. Sheng steps forward and replies, first, the transaction currency only recognizes the ancient coin still used in the steel art city, the yuan. After this, Sheng clacks and moves from there. The trading account will not recognize the account number of Xin Sheng Bank. Thirdly, the trading conduction place is only in Steel Art City, and there is one more thing. After this, Sheng, showing him the index finger, says if he wants to threaten others, make sure his words and actions coincide, just like when he said that the Balili Empire would pay for bombing the ambassador of Yuter. Saying this, Sheng leaves, and both of them sit there. Fengshen surprisingly looks toward Locke Morgan. While Locke Morgan abuses Sheng behind his back, he smiles, asking Fengshen if, even if they don't use peace bombs, they have a million ways to reply to Yuter's challenge. Hear this, and Fengshen doesn't respond and sits there silently. After some minutes, he gets up, says yes, totally agrees, and then leaves. Before leaving, he waved a hand and smiled, saying to Locke Morgan he hoped he would take good care of the past and present glory of the Balili Empire. After this, Fengshen leaves that venue and returns to his mansion, taking the celestial copper pieces. He is sitting on the ground holding an amount of cosmic copper in hand. He says this is cosmic copper, and he has never seen cosmic copper with this kind of crystal structure. Cosmic copper can further be refined like this. However, Fengshen companion stood aside, and he asked him, holding that celestial copper, wasn't the man who called himself Xin Sheng say he would attack the deployment of peace bombs in the new South Democratic Alliance. He wants to use this to apologize for his statement. He passes the object to Fengtain, saying he is unsure, but he also sends a message along with this item. In this item, the message was recorded for Fengtain, and he opened the sound and started listening to the news and the message. If they are destined to meet, he will show him the future of all races in the world face to face. However, on Sheng's side, the two brothers, Baowen and Baowu, were waiting for him outside the venue as Sheng approached them from behind. They both turn and look toward the Lord, asking if it is over already. Sheng smiles and replies yes, everyone was refreshing. After this, Sheng tells Baowen to stay there for a bit, and hears Baowen surprisingly ask why. Sheng responds, he waits and sees who the first person to leave the venue after he is. The power to which that person belongs will be their most promising ally. Hear this, Bowen turns his face toward Venner, replaying as he commands it's a trivial matter. Then Sheng took Beowu from there. While on the way, Beowu asked Sheng why he purposely left his brother alone. Sheng replies that if the following is a pleasure glass of wine, his brother is drinking it much worse than he is. As Sheng and Beowu stood aside the tree, there was nobody. A guy named Yangya approached there, asking Sheng if he was the one who drove out Kazuya Kaio and taken Yuter, which should have belonged to the Empire. Hearing this, Beowu angrily stepped forward to Yangya, saying stopping a leader of the country without authorization is an international political matter. Then Beowu asks what he wants. Yangya replies that the original plan was for him to care for Kazuya Kaio, but unluckily, he happened to go to the Sakal Salt Desert for a big trip, and he was very interested when he heard his anecdotes by chance over there. After this, Beowu and Yangya grab each other's hands and start clawing each other as the fight is about to begin between the two. But before this, Yangya angrily asks if Beowu, now that he is back, can make up for this regret and is looking forward to it. Moreover, Yangya was human, and his race was interjected human, and his level was 101, and he was low-level divine. However, at Dao Zhen and Madame Qi's side, Doa Zhen bound Qi's hands up with an iron chain, imprisoned her, and beat her severely. Madame Qi, sitting there injured, asks if it is her turn to torture her personally, and Dao Zhen, holding the iron stick in her hands, smiles. She asks in return. Madame Qi wants to become more loyal to her. Saying this, she moves toward Qi and starts tickling her feet with a feather, and Qi laughs loudly. Moreover, at Sheng's side, he stands there looking toward Beowu and Yangya. He feels indifferent and says boring is meaningless and not worth looking forward to. Then he orders Beowu to go and exchange opinions with Yangya. Hearing this, Beowu starts sweating and replies this person in front of them isn't an ordinary human being. Yangya is an integrated human, a variant branch of the human race. He has undergone human transformation by the Imperial Special Missions Bureau and is no less potent than Kazuya Kaio. In the public community of the Balili Empire, Yangya has long been known as the strongest human. Hear this, Sheng says to Beowu that it doesn't matter whether he wins or loses. Propaganda tools of the Empire will proclaim it as a political victory. After this, Sheng winked at Beowu, telling him to think of it as a military exchange. Go and have as much fun as he liked as they want decency, let them have it. Yangya stands there folding her arms, looking toward Beowu, and says Beowu is not the ideal opponent, now Beowu is just fine. He moves from there to Beowu, saying there is a military training base nearby, follow him, and then both Beowu and Yangya leave. Sheng stands there pondering that the Balili Empire is too eager to save face. This struggle for statehood seems like it will be a very long one. Meanwhile, Fengshen appears behind Sheng, asking if it is true that someone in the world will be out of luck if he thinks like this. Hear this, Sheng replies, asking in return if there is something he would like to advise him when the president of an empire comes to him with his old shaky legs. Fengshen smiles and shows Sheng that green stick and replies that Mr. Xin Sheng is by no means an ordinary man, so he is sure he doesn't like polite words as much as he does. He is confused about a matter and would like to ask for advice, although he has read many of his legendary records and gone through them 100 times. After this, Fengshen asks Sheng, ultimately in a kingly way, what it is. Sheng replies the answer to this question he presumes to have already been conveyed to him. Hear this, Fengshen remembers Sheng's words when he said that he has no intention to kill, he only lives for the living in the world. Then Fengshen asks what he means to live for the living and what this statement means. After this, the Fengshen image starts flashing into Sheng's eye, and then Sheng replies that immortals are the living, and so are the insects and animals. To govern based on understanding the ultimate nature of the residence is the ultimate kingly way. Hear this, Fengtain asks to his understanding, letting the living indeed be the residence is the ultimate kingly way, and is it not as simple as he thought? As they were talking, Locke Morgan approached them, asking them whether there was no need to walk so swiftly. Then he moved toward them and smiled, asking about political positions and if they could speak correctly, even as independent individuals. His manager lady was with him. Fengtain replies, asking Locke Morgan what he would like to talk about from an individual standpoint. Locke Morgan comes near Sheng and extends his hand, saying he likes desserts too, especially coffee flavored. He can send him some when Xin Sheng returns home. He believes he will also like it. Sheng smiles and replies he is very courteous, then he will give him a few pieces of the Empire's favorite celestial copper ore in return. However, Sheng, standing there while talking to them, smiles and thinks he has no interest in coffee, while Locke Morgan looks toward a smile, thinking only of a few pieces of celestial copper ore, while Fengshen looks toward both of them, thinking, let's fake a smile with them. After this, Locke Morgan says that he has heard of Xin Sheng's kingly philosophy. Since he claims to be the first emperor of the ancient era, he certainly won't miss this opportunity to learn from him in person. After this, Locke Morgan asks what is the ultimate kingly way he is pursuing. Sheng makes a poker face and replies, Mr. Presidential King. Many carriers that are born in this world have the ultimate goal of destroying themselves. For example, if they are doctors, he wants the world to be free of disease and injury. But if such a great wish were to come true, there would no longer be a need for doctors worldwide. The same is true for police, the military, etc. Then Sheng smiles, saying the same goes for the ultimate kingly way. Sheng, looking toward his hand, says, when the ultimate kingly way is realized, it will be the day when the world's kings will be destroyed. Hear this, Locke Morgan gets frightened and tells Sheng he is very well. Then he turns, saying he wishes him eternal glory kingly way. At the same time, Fengshen stands there and thinks the same question but a very different answer. After this, Locke Morgan leaves, and Sheng and Fengshen start talking. Fegtane asks Sheng if he wants to come to the new South Democratic Alliance, and he will personally receive him. Sheng replies, asking under what ostensible purpose. Fengshen answered, tomb sweeping. Hear this, Sheng throbbed his arm on which the mark was, then Sheng closed his eyes, saying it was right he would go. However, Fengshen says if he doesn't feel like it, he can also come over under the pretense of wishing him a happy birthday. Then, he asks him how old he is. Fengshen smiles and replies almost 100 years old. Hearing this, Sheng stays silent. After this, Fengtane puts his hand on his heart and asks if he is not worried. Besides his person and the most vital human he is about to fight. This is a favorite tactic of the Empire to get back in the game. Moreover, at the Balili Empire military base security check entrance, Yangyue passed the security checking door, and Beowu was behind him in line. As soon as Beowu stands under the door, the security alarm makes a noise while Sheng stands there smiling and asking. If he isn't mistaken, the evaluation of personal strength in this era is linked to weapons. As soon as the security alarm sounded, the security guard took Beowu to the side. There, one of them smiled, saying their base had strict security. The other one smiled, saying let him search well for anything unsafe on his body, while Sheng stood there smiling, thinking, who is more robust and weaker is yet to be seen. On Beowu's side, he lifts his jacket while Yangyue stands there and turns his head to see if he is conscious to see what comes out of the Beowu jacket. As soon as Beowu lifted his coat, there were a lot of weapons, and then Beowu said he was at least one of the characters who ensured the independence of the Steel Art City. Then he asked the security guard if they were brave enough to search him while Beowu's level was increased from 50 to 97. However, Shuya is lying on the ship top on the beach chair and enjoying the sunshine, thinking it's almost like being on vacation. Suddenly, the ship starts moving so fast that Shuya gets scared, and her glasses fall. She sits up angrily, saying, no way. The submarine has been sailing at the entire sea for many days and still hasn't broken out of these waters. It is weird, and she will contact little Sheng for help. However, at the Balili security base, the security guards stood outside the entrance, and the media and press gathered there. One of them, holding a camera, asks his teammate what they will shoot while crouching at the back door of this military base. His companion replies that it is a private battle, and their teammate says making it the top news and reporting in the direction of imperial greatness is just inches away. Meanwhile, the back door opens. Seeing this, the man with them tells his group mate someone is coming. Get ready. As soon as the door opened, Beowu came out bleeding, and a hang of blood fell from his body to the ground. One of his arms is also separated from his body. Seeing him there, the mean people start capturing his picture. One of the girls from them asks if he is the Beowu of Steel Art City, and the other one says while capturing the image. Such a wretched look makes Beowu smile and pass by them while standing on the footpath. The media's man says it seems to have nothing to say. The lady stands aside from him and replies it appears to be entirely for the Imperial warrior. And the third one starts the slogan praising Beowu, saying that the victor's stance should be well photographed. After this, as the door opens, Yangyue comes out. Seeing him there, the media people say Yangyue is coming out and get ready to capture his picture. Yangyue was silent, and his body was painted entirely in different colors. The paint was liquid, and its drops fell on the ground. As they start capturing his picture, he shouts at them, asking what they are shooting, just getting lost. The media people get scared and run away from there, seeing this Dao Zhen standing with the tree and laughing. Then she tells Yangya that this appearance can't be reported as a victory. He clenches his fist and replies. All of Beowulf's attacks failed with paint. Even though the paint dyed his body, he continued to spew a constant stream of various colors. Then Yangya tells Dao Zhen this wasn't even a fight, it was just a hootenanny. Dao Zhen smiled, saying how embarrassing it was to let her help him. After this, he approaches and thanks her, and then she assimilates him and absorbs the paint. While absorbing the color from his body, she smiles, saying surprisingly, it turned out to be a fusion of biological pigments that are particularly easy for human beings to absorb. He came prepared while Anagia stood there, closed his eyes, and replied that this method of mental triumph was the only way for an average human to win against him. After absorbing the paint, she turned that paint into a different color of stone while sizzling the rock on her hand. She says she heard that the negotiations at the table have broken down, honor has not been recovered, and the empire will be even crazier afterward. Yangya replies that fighting for the kingdom is his calling. Tell him where the next battlefield is. She smiles, telling him to calm down a little bit, he won't be kept waiting long. A few days later, somewhere in the New South Democratic Alliance, both Fengtian and Sheng were coming toward the cemetery. While on the way, Fengtian tells Sheng he invited him to the grave then, but he didn't expect to ask to go immediately after the meeting. Sheng replies that he didn't expect him to agree either. Sheng asks him if this isn't an obvious way of telling the Bolili Empire that the New South Democratic Alliance will be on Yuder's side. Yangya smiles and turns his head, saying no politics on today's trip. After this, he points toward the cemetery and tells Sheng the leader is his grave. Sheng asks if it was built according to his will, and both start climbing the cemetery stairs. While rising, Yangya replies yes. He laid the foundation of modern industry for the New South Democratic Alliance. With his contribution, he could enter the immortal pavilion to live a long life until now. However, both join the cemetery. While standing before grave number 282, Yagnya tells Sheng that he doesn't wish to serve two masters, refusing to cultivate immortality. He wanted to live as an ordinary human being. Sheng says the human race hailed Gongchang King as the god of craftsmanship. Then, while touching the tomb of his grave, Sheng says he exhausted his human lifespan limit waiting for him. After this, Sheng sits on his grave close to his eyes, thinking that he has parted from the world and that there are no more skilled craftsmen. Fengshen stands there, calls Sheng, and Sheng sits there. Sheng says he wants to mourn him alone for a while, then asks if he can give him some time. After this, Fengshen leaves there, saying he will wait for him along the way as Sheng sits alone. Meanwhile, a box falls before Sheng. Sheng opens his eyes and stays silent. Then, while extending his hand and using his power, he says come, and the box itself comes toward Sheng. After this, the trunk opened, and a water container appeared from that box. Also, Dao Zheng's mind and eyes were in the container. However, a strong gust of wind blows, and from that container, Dao Zhen comes out, covering her body with flowers. After this, while moving towards Sheng, she says Gongchang King was buried there. She has known about this for a long time, but he never had the chance to come and pay her respects to him in person. Then she kneeled before Sheng, asking if he had lived until today. She would be a cinch to overtake the entire Bolili Empire's industrial system by himself. After this, Sheng replies to the human race who followed her back. Then, he is the one who knows her mind the best. Her timely appearance shows she has guessed what he is thinking. After this, she lifts his arm on which the mark was and says that it's indeed true, my lord, and then she licks his arm, while saying the minister who has followed him and survived this way. He knows about several of them, and among them is one enough to make him angry. However, thousands of years ago, Xin Sheng's core ruling group encompassed a variety of talents from multiple races. Among them were three great human clans, significantly integrating the human race governor Dao Zhen, responsible for constantly testing the rightness of the kingly way through opposing supervision. Mutant human race, the sole political official Jianer, is accountable for overseeing strange, bizarre, and independent creatures, especially ruling over them. Immortal human race consul San Kang's negative aristocratic implementation of the kingly way, with one person having absolute power over 10,000 people. After this, Sheng sat there on the grave and asked Dao Zhen if she should know the whereabouts of Jianer. She kneels and replies that Jianer isn't in this world anymore. The oddity led by her was originally an existence that was not accepted by the world. They had no place without his leadership, so Jianer crossed to another world. Traveling to a different world is like opening the cap of the bottle of the world. When the water in the bottle flows out, sooner and later, something from another world will come in. Because of this, Kazuya Kaio came to this world. Regulating the oddity was initially Jianer's job. Telling this, she crawls and comes towards Sheng, while Sheng, looking toward her, says he understands the situation and choice of giant art. It's completely understandable. After this, Sheng asks about Sang King. Sheng said Gong Chang King had craftsmanship duty and didn't participate in politics. However, his epitaph mentions the political operation of Sang Kang. Sang Kang's actions promoted Gong Chang King to settle in a new South Democratic alliance. After this, Sheng says that as an immortal human race, Sang Kang must be able to live until now, and he knows that he is fighting against the Balili Empire. He wonders why he hasn't come to see him yet, and hears this, Dao Zhen comes close to him, telling him, with all due respect, that Sang Kang has surrendered. After this, he hugs and embraces the name and power he has given him, saying he now calls himself Zhen Kang, and rests in the corner of the Sakal Salt Desert. Looking toward her, Sheng also asks about the Sakal Salt Desert he is doing there. Dao Zhen, showing him an evil charm, asks if it would be clear at a glance if he went there in person. Then Sheng smiles, asking if she wants to trick him into going to Sakal Salt Desert. Then Sheng smiled, saying, unfortunately, he still had a lot of work to do in Uter and the NSDA. Dao Zhen lovingly looks toward him and at what he is saying, and she is his personally created opponent. It would be a disgrace if he couldn't even succeed in this plot. Telling this, she sucked in Sheng's body. Meanwhile, Fengshen came there asking Sheng if he had sorted his mood. As Sheng is sitting on the grave, Fengtain, holding the tray of sweet tart, tells Sheng he asked someone to make some sweet tarts and hopes this will help him regain his peace. After this, Sheng gets up, patting himself, and replies, "It's right, let's continue to talk about the business. It is also time to decide on the exact amount of NSDA's investment in Uter Fengshen." Pointing toward the entrance door of the cemetery says, "Please come." And then they both come down the stairs. Sheng reads the phrase written on cemetery pillars and thinks of conspiracy. However, the conflict between Uter and the Balili Empire had only subsided, and the new South Democratic Alliance quickly finalized its investment in Uter. Moreover, the initial investment amount is 400 million yuan simultaneously in exchange for the stable supply promise of celestial copper as part of interest. Even when the Balili Empire announced the blockade and sanctions on Uter, new South Democratic Alliance chief Fengshen also made a discreet personal visit to Uter while Locke Morgan read the letter and got angry. Sheng took Fengtain to his lab. There, Fengtain asked Sheng if this was his celestial copper production lab. Sheng answered during the tripartite meeting that he was using the ability of perfect mimicry to show him cosmic copper products. The objective of his mimicry was to create an ideal laboratory plant environment, and he achieved a technological breakthrough. He is confident in the commercialization process for them from scratch with the assistance of Steel Art City experts afterward. After this, Sheng smiled, asking Fengtain if he wanted to increase investment now and if he could consider increasing the share of the new South Democratic Alliance. Fengshen replies that if he were to do it himself, he is afraid it would take less than 1% of the 400 million yuan. And the significant portion of these 400 million yuan he is sure will be spent in a place that has nothing to do with celestial copper. It will lay the foundation for the country's establishment and the struggle for survival against the Balili Empire. Sheng giggles, asking if he can see that while Fengshen points toward Sheng as the chief immortal of the new South Democratic Alliance. His uniqueness is a king's wisdom eyesight, and he has a panoramic view of the kingly qualities of all living things. However, Sheng smiles, saying it's a pity his unique ability is not unusual in eyesight. He believes he won't lose to any creature. After this, Sheng's eyes start glowing. Then, pointing toward his eye, Sheng says the strategic move of the Balili Empire has angered the new South Democratic Alliance. As a bargaining chip to knock down the Balili Empire, Uter, which has his backing, is undoubtedly a better choice than Steel Art City. After this, Sheng told Fengshen that he was fully aware that 400 million yuan would not be used in business but did not hesitate to invest in it. They know the hand in glove behind the Celestial Copper investment project very well. Hear this, Fengshen starts sweating, then sighs and replies he likes straightforwardness. He is too blatant. Then Sheng Bleak says the naked living are the majority. He has no comprehension of what it means to live for a living. As they both talked, Shang Yuji came from behind, running towards Sheng and requesting him to save her. Then, standing near Sheng, she starts fumbling. Sheng asks her what happened, and as soon as Sheng asks, she tightly hugs him. After this, with teary eyes, Shang Yuji tells Sheng that she has lost her dragon appearance and has completely turned into a human being. However, they return to their mansion. While sitting in the living room, Sheng extends his hand towards Shang Yuji, saying give him her hand. She put her hand on Sheng's arm, and then Sheng started sizzling his mimicry into her body, then the mimicry grew into her body. while sending his mimicry into her body. Shang thinks it's a virus, and this virus not only drastically alters host genes but also rapidly triggers dominant mutations. Modification continues until it changes the host's biological classification without killing the host. This is an artificially bred virus with an invaluable range of infections that have resulted in the humanization of all races. After this, Shang Yuji, holding Shang's hand and looking down, tells after each clan's emergence of the humanization phenomenon. He has been trying hard to fight it and retain her dragon appearance, and in the end, she ends up looking like a human. It was even more human-like than Wooly. Then she sniffed, and with teary eyes, she asked him what she should do now. After this, Shang hugs and soothes her, saying, "Don't worry, changing her back into a dragon is not tricky." Shang Yuji, with teary eyes, asks really. He replies the hard part is how to save more victims like her. For now, let's put it with it for a little while. After this, Shang called Origami, who also stood there. She smiled and asked him to call her. Shang replies he wants to reconfirm the virus she was infected with initially, and then Origami kneels before him, saying she is at his disposal. Then Shang touches her face and releases his mimicry on her face, saying an analysis of the residual information of the virus shows that it is indeed the same type of humanization virus. However, the kind of virus she is infected with is more primitive than the virus with which the Shang Yuji is infected. Here this Origami replies that the Arakoa that attacked her and the Arakoa before they were humanized are all native species. They have never left the Sakal Salt Desert region. And Shang comes close to Origami telling, in other words, the Sakal Salt Desert may be the origin of angry events of every race. When Shang Yuji came, furious, he was crying and rolling behind. As soon as Shang came close to the Origami, he closed his eyes and she looked at him lovingly. Meanwhile, Yang Yu pushes open the door, telling Master there is something essential to report. See her there, three of them straighten up quickly, and Shang, with light speed, sits on his chair while Origami stands aside. Shang thinks of intentional evasion. While on Shang's other side, Shang Yuji stood, believing they couldn't let this human look down on her. Yang Yu looks toward the three of them but stays silent. After this, Yang Yu tells Tu Shuya that the mission was originally to travel west of the Sky Curtain Sea and communicate with the various tribes in that region. Then she says that her submarine was stranded near the Sakal Salt Desert and could not escape those waters. She requested to disembark in the Sakal Salt Desert, hoping to explore it. However, Shang sat there thinking of Sang Kang, the humanization virus, stranded in the sea area, and in this way, Dao Zhen wanted to force him to make a trip to the Sakal Salt Desert in person. After this, he gets up, sets his tie, and thinks there are myriad ways in the world. Why should he be afraid of this way? After this, he got severe before he arranged Yuder's affairs as soon as possible. However, Shang held a meeting with his team there. He told them he had decided on the interim prime minister of Yuder, and that person was. Yang Yu gets nervous while Shang points toward Li and announces that the person is Mrs. Li. Hear this, Yang Yu, Huaxu Lai, and Wu Li get shocked, and then Shang tells them all Maebe that some of them will have doubts. Let him explain the rationale for hiring people, whether it is an official or a minor official. The two most basic requirements must be met. After this, he says the first requirement is unique expertise, and the second is the undivided mindset. Then Shang closed his eyes, saying that reaching the pinnacle of expertise is extremity to be decided to only one thing in their heart and mind, unabnormality. Moreover, Shang opens his eyes, saying that his minimum standard for hiring people is at least he must be abnormally extreme. Compared with Mrs. Li, in this regard, everyone there is rubbish. Hear this, Li blushed and started acting, saying if he prized her so much, she would react while the three of them, Yang Yu, Huaxu Lai, and Wu Li, looked toward her, feeling it twisting. Was it a compliment? After this, Shang tells Mrs. Li's daughter Wang came to help oversee the farming. There, she discusses every critical topic about the farm with Ba Lily. Huaxu Lai is responsible for dealing with the economic war with the Bailey Empire. Shang, looking toward Ducini, says that on behalf of Mrs. Li, he extended an invitation to Steel Art City. After this, Shang says they hope Yuder and Steel Art City can reach a deep alliance and establish a strategic all-water partnership. Then Shang, holding his deity trident, says they recognize the standard order, ensuring civility and demand is the basis for building a society. They pursue common aspirations, cooperate toward the same development goals, and guard a common destiny. As an alliance of the living, they need to take the fate of the living firmly into their own hands. Before he returns, she will have Mrs. Li draft all the rules in consultation with the top management of Steel Art City. At that time, in the presence of the Wand of the Trinity, they will witness the birth of the new regime. Hear this, and Li bows her head respectfully before Sheng while Bowu and Ducini curiously look toward her. However, Ducini turns her head, asking Sheng if he plans to go somewhere. Sheng gets up and replies, yes, a little left official business. Sheng stood there and thought it was a bit of personal interaction to prioritize, and now he was heading to Sokol Salt Desert. On the other side, the raw goods company was taking the goods in boxes, and Dao Zhen's inside stowaway was one of the fragile goods boxes. Fishes were all around her body. However, in Sokol Salt Desert, Tu Shuya was sweating in the blazing sun and standing there creating shelter with her hand. She thinks the sunlight is too intense and doesn't want to go ashore. Then she looks up and believes although she has already asked for little Sheng's help, it's not like she has admitted defeat yet. At least she has to get to the bottom of the reason for being trapped in the Sokol Salt Desert. After this, she feels intoxicated and creates an image in her mind. There, Sheng was patting her head while thinking this. She was happily telling herself that there would be a reward for the merit, and she wished for it to be as cozy as that night. After this, Tu Shuya makes a sad face, thinking she can't fail, can't be abandoned again. Meanwhile, a guy looking toward her extends his hand, asking where this foreign lady is from and if she has water. He is dying of thirst. Tu Shuya looked at him in surprise, and then she got happy thinking of a chance to impose favors. Then she fumbled the water bottle while replying, the submarine is stocked with extra food and water, enough to make someone grateful. After this, she asks him. She doesn't think asking for some helpful information is too much. The guy looks toward her and asks in return if she is from the Spirit Fox clan. He gets up and slaps her, telling her to come any closer and not try to play with him. However, her water bottle fell from her hand, and she got scared while the guy pointing toward her snarled, asking how come a distinguished race like her was not dead yet. Just go away and get out of there, as he yells at her while she quietly stands there. Meanwhile, the guy slumps and falls. Tu Shuya looked toward her, thinking he would rather be dehydrated and comatose than have water from the Spirit Fox clan. After this, Tu Shuya thinks it's her fault, and it must be because she was thinking of exchanging information through giving grace that things turned out like this. Then she looks up and thinks she seems to have spent too much time in the ancient ruins of the empire, and almost forgets why she fled there. However, Tu Shuya splashes the water bottle on the guy's face and then leaves. After this, she moved to the market wearing clack, and people bought and sold goods there. Then she entered the market. There, she pulled the curtain away and entered. As soon as she entered, she heard the people whispering and discussing spirit foxes. Two guys stand aside, discussing. One asks the other if he has heard someone has encountered the spirit fox. The other asks if he is talking about Spirit Fox, the alien clan that delights in seducing and bewitching other races. The first one replies that historically speaking, some of their Sokol Salt Desert tribes even perished because of the Spirit Fox clan. As Tu Shuya walked past them and heard their discussion, she stood there to listen to them. However, the guy says to his companion that it's disgusting. Hopefully, it was just someone's hallucination due to dehydration. The first one replies yes, there are simply no living beings willing to be with the Spirit Fox. Tu Shuya stands aside, listening to them. After this, she moves toward the shopkeeper, throws the water bottle on his counter, and tells the boss she wants to sell water. The shopkeeper holds the water and asks if this water is such high-quality purified water. Then, holding the water bottle, he brings it close to his eye and looks at it carefully, asking if this is the product of the water purifier beside the queen. Then, the shopkeeper tells Tu Shuya that he will never mistreat her. She comes to him and whispers that she needs to. The southern waters seem inaccessible, and she asks if he knows what is happening. Hear this. The shopkeeper glooms and replies to little sister their vocal leopard cat clan in the Sokol Salt Desert doesn't go near the coast. It is far away from the mountain town, and there is no fresh water to be found. Telling this, he extends his hand towards Tu Shuya, saying she is not a foreign stowaway. Ask if she is and if it is a criminal attempting to abscond. Tu Shuya back away from his counter in fear, but he pulled her clack, and the people sitting there fumbled to see her and started shouting it was a spirit fox that her tail, and there was a Spirit Fox clan. The people start shouting and running away in fear, saying don't meet her eye and don't smell her body. And now only the shopkeeper and Tu Shuya were there. The shopkeeper standing there said to Tu Shuya she must have stolen the purified water and came to trick him into assisting her in her escape. She turns her head and looks toward him. Meanwhile, he takes out the dagger and moves toward her, saying she is an incarnation of evil. He can only make up for the sin of the conversation he just had with her by killing her with his own hands. Seeing him moving toward her, she gets scared, thinking it's troublesome, and to save herself from that shopkeeper, she uses her spiritual ability to halt. Tu Shuya's spiritual ability surrounds him, and he becomes unable to move. Standing there, he trembles and abuses her. Thinking not good, she has to return to the submarine first. It's the only place to keep her safe.